Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro, friends. Today's episode of the podcast is dedicated to supporting the Rural Bushfire Service, and Australian Wildlife Associations. Please head to the show notes and see how you can support the efforts to fight the raging bushfires in Australia. Today on the Daily Coffee Pro, we are doing part 2 of the discussion on workplace culture. So yesterday we spoke about how to understand or knowing your workplace culture. Today what we want to take a look at is how to change that workplace culture if that's what's appropriate for you. If you've decided that you don't like what's happening in your workplace culture or you'd like to evolve it, well, this is going to be a great conversation for you. The place that I like to start whenever I'm working on this kind of stuff with my clients, and these episodes of the Daily Coffee Pro are exactly the kinds of 15-minute consulting sessions. It's like a 15-minute consulting session or insight into a consulting session that I would normally do with my clients. Those sessions are usually 2 hours or an hour. And this is exactly how I would approach this situation. So if somebody said to me I wanted to change my workplace culture, we would start with one very important question. And that question goes something like, or exactly like, how do you want your workplace to feel? And by that, what I mean is, how do you want people to feel when they come into your workplace? How do you want to feel when you're working in your workplace? How do you want all the staff to feel when they're at work? Also, as an extension of that, how do you want your customers to feel about being in the space where your employees are? Why are these questions important? Well, because once you start understanding how you want people to feel when they're at work, that gives you a direct look into the kind of culture that you want to create. The way that I would invite you to start getting kind of into the mindset of answering that question is put yourself in the space of if you were an employee of the company that you own. Now, you as an owner are an employee of the company that you own, but I don't mean as the owner. I mean as someone who's hired, and if they quit tomorrow, they're not going to be a part of the business ever. So put yourself in that mindset, and what I want you to do is I want you to think about, how do I, as an employee, feel? Well, said this way, if I was an employee and this is the company that I wanted to work for, how do I feel when I know I'm going to get up and go to work? How do I feel when I arrive at work? How do I feel when I start working for the day? How do I feel when I take my lunch break and when I come back from my lunch break? Am I excited about that? How do I feel when I have to address conflict with a coworker? How do I feel when I have to raise a difficult issue to management? How do I feel when I have to ask for a pay rise? How do I feel when I don't know how to do something at work and I need to figure out what the answer is to a difficult question? How do I go about raising a safety issue? How do I go about quitting? How do I go about getting ready to leave for the day? Now, the reason I want to invite you to ask those questions is I want you to get an insight into what the scenarios would look like based on the kind of workplace that you would want this to be. Do you want it to be a super serious workplace? Do you want it to be an exciting workplace? Do you want it to be a place where people feel happy and they're high-fiving each other everywhere? Do you want it to be a total woke culture and everything is about political correctness and pushing a social agenda and, all that kind of stuff? Or do you want it to be a place that feels very scientific? Do you want people to feel that it is about their intellectualism? Or is it about being open-minded and thinking, well, we don't know anything and we're always looking to explore? These are really important questions to ask so that you can start exploring. And this is a creative thing as a business owner. This is one of those wonderful creative things that you get to do, where you can say, well, I kind of want to take a little bit of that happy high five culture, and I want to add a little bit of that technical feel that comes with that. But I also want things to be a little bit serious. And so if that's the case, if I've answered that question, then I'm going to go back to the idea of, okay, so if that's the culture that I'm trying to set and I'm an employee, what does it feel like when I'm getting ready to go for work? Well, I'm stoked because I know I'm going to be turning up to work and everyone's going to be high-fiving me. I also know that I'm going to be able to explore some scientific, technical stuff that I've learned about roasting or brewing or green buying or whatever it is I'm doing. I also know that because my boss has told me that that's the focus of things, when things go wrong, we take these things seriously. And because I know my boss has set that goal and that's the culture, I know that I can trust that if we're taking things seriously, when something goes wrong, there's a communication strategy that's put into place to deal with that stuff. So having gone through the exercise and go the whole way, like try and figure out unusual situations that don't quite happen very often, but you know that they actually have happened in your workplace, and ask yourself, if we have the ideal culture that I'm trying to create, how do I as an employee, if I was an employee, how do I feel at all these different times? Now that you've got that in your mind, I want you to figure out how people feel right now. And that goes back to what we spoke about yesterday, knowing what the culture is already. Now, if you know that in the current culture, people feel that they don't know how to communicate with management, people don't know if they're required to know everything that there is about coffee, or whether it doesn't matter if they know much about coffee. If people don't know the way that they are expected to greet each other and feel at work, if none of these things are defined, well, then you know where you are and you know where you want to try and get to. If you don't know how to do that, that's what people like me are for. That's why you organize monthly coaching with somebody like me. But if you do know how to get there, start about the business of trying to understand how to make that happen. And this is not something that gets implemented, in a week, in a day. This is a leadership thing, and leadership is a lifelong journey. And when you're talking about leading in a business, it's constantly evolving. Cultures are cultivated. Cultures are not instantly created. And so I would invite you to start considering where your culture is, where you'd like your culture to be, and how you're going to go about shifting from where it is to where you'd like it to be. And on top of that, I want you to think of why you want it to transition from where it is to where it's going to get to. This is the deep, deep kind of work that I do with consulting clients, particularly with those that are on monthly coaching strategies, because we get to work these things through. and dig deep and figure out like what's not working. What is it that is stopping us from meeting the growth in the business that we're trying to aim for? What is it that's stopping us from getting that extra 20% of the way? Like we're doing 80% of the work, but there's something that's stopping us from getting 100% of the way there. And it's usually a cultural issue in the workplace. So if it's something that you would like to work on, and you would like to have a conversation about whether coaching is something that you do want to explore, connect through the website, mapperforward.org, and there's plenty of ways to figure out how to contact me there. And if you have a specific question about culture, you're an employee or an employer, you can also hit us up. Click on the button, Ask the Daily Coffee Pro, send us your questions, and we'll happily take a look at it and answer it on the Daily Coffee Pro. Peace, love, and peanut butter, friends. Have an amazing rest of your day.